Hello again, everyone, and thank you for joining us for this Sunday's edition of Alaska Weather. I'm meteorologist Dave Percy, and I'll be hosting today's show. Up first, to go through the hazardous weather graphics, there are no watches, warnings, or advisories out anywhere in the state for tonight and through tomorrow. That may change possibly on Tuesday for the southwest part of the state. Otherwise, from there, moving on to the breakup map here, it's open now, past Eagle, well past Eagle here, and then some open areas continue on down to the Yukon, and showing mostly white here in the Yukon, but it gets really broke up, as I mentioned yesterday, especially down here in the lower Delta, lower valley on out to the Delta. Of course, Kuskokwim's done, and rivers up here to the north, not yet really showing any breakup signs, at least for the moment. And also, river forecasts are going to be issued for south central Alaska, I believe starting today. And again, yesterday, river forecasts began for the southeast coastal areas and up in the Tanana Valley. So moving on to fire danger, this area up here in the upper Yukon Valley expanded now south of the Yukon River and along the Porcupine up here, and then picking up some areas of high fire danger, again for grass-type fuels here off to the southwest, even down around the Kuskokwim Delta. That's due to the dry conditions today, some sunshine, and the gusty winds of anywhere from 15 to as high as 30 miles an hour in this area. And increase in the winds with no precipitation here also brought some high fire danger to the Kenai Peninsula there in and around the greater Kenai-Seldovia area. And from that, we'll go to the satellite imagery, and you can see clouds, precipitation already starting to move in to the northern southeast coast here, starting to increase. Juneau picked up about 1,500 in the last 12 hours. Currently, some light rain going on there. Just really isolated on the showers and moisture down to the south, but still mostly cloudy skies there. And winds on the increase here, coming up about gusts 35 miles an hour now from Middleton Island. Portage had gusts to 45 miles an hour, as did the Barren Islands, and there are gale warnings out tonight for the North Gulf Coast here. And otherwise, rainfall tapering off this afternoon, becoming a little more showery there, Kodiak Island, with Akiak picking up about 1/3 of an inch. Kodiak State Airport had roughly 1/4 of an inch. But maybe a few sprinkles, isolated showers, mainly along the Alaska Range without much up to the northeast there. But this area of cloudiness starting to develop because there's an upper-level low pressure center right in this area, kind of backed its way here out of the Mackenzie River Delta over there yesterday and is now up over the northeast interior. And that's starting to generate some moisture, enhance the clouds here, and they'll probably become some showers this evening. And general area of snow up toward the eastern Brooks Range, but it looks like the heaviest amounts may stay over in Canada. Otherwise, we had clear skies all the way down to Nunivak Island here along the Yukon Delta coast, Seward Peninsula, Norton Sound. Most of the Seward Peninsula saw some sunshine, at least parts of it. And then back to the north there, dry along the Arctic coast, some clouds, low clouds over the eastern Arctic coast, generally above 1,000 feet there, but precipitation free. And winds pretty gusty up there as well, about 30-35 miles an hour here. Barter Island, a gust to about 40 miles per hour, or actually 45 miles an hour, and 30 miles per hour at Dead Horse. Otherwise, some fog around St. Lawrence Island today, reduced visibilities at times to 1/2 mile. That improved a little this afternoon. And some light precipitation in the form of rain or snow, very light amounts there through the Bering Strait. Otherwise, this whole area looked really good today. And then the front with the rain spilling into the Bristol Bay area, with Agagic picking about 1 to 2/10 of an inch. And then it was a little heavier down here, Kodiak, but the front's already moved through there. Another batch of moisture out here for some light rain. Ahkun Island picked up 4/10 of an inch today, and lighter amounts over the Alaska Peninsula. Just kind of cloudy with some widely to isolated scattered showers back to the western. Pretty light winds there along the Aleutians. This trough axis elongated right along the chain there. A little breezier up to the north, but not too bad. And looking at the forecast for tonight, rain increases here across the southeast coast. Good fetch southwest flow right into the area there, and that's definitely a rain pattern for them. And periods of rain and fog for the North Gulf Coast. Again, gale warnings out tonight due to this front coming up for the North Gulf Coast. Be a little breezy in Prince William Sound, and but once the front pushes through, winds will diminish. More showery conditions. Look for a chance of showers. Kodiak Island mostly cloudy, and periods of rain here over the southwest interior, mostly the Kuskokwim Delta, maybe the southern Kuskokwim Valley, and really not looking for much, say from Anchor Point up to Palmer, Eagle River in the downsloping areas, but it would be significantly wetter on down Turnagain Arm to Portage Valley and, of course, Prince William Sound. And then this area up here starting to develop a little bit of moisture with some rain or snow showers over the eastern interior areas around Eagle. That'll be mostly snow, but wherever it falls will be quite light. Stays clear back here to the west. And for tomorrow, that one front kind of washes out, and another system here, a little bit stronger. Again, the same pattern starts to spread some warm front type rain into the panhandle again, especially in the afternoon, increasing once again. Periods of rain continue up here along the North Gulf Coast, leftover moisture there, and then this area will push back in toward Kodiak Island. Could see some light rain developing, mostly in the afternoon hours. Otherwise, you may have a few breaks in the morning, especially for Bristol Bay. Still be some showers over the mountains, mostly cloudy, scattered showers, mainly mountainous terrain here, south central Alaska, except for the rain up into Prince William Sound, and some widespread showers out here over the Yukon Delta. So kind of a switch from the sunshine you saw today to chance of rain for Nunivak Island, and offshore flow, gusty east-northeast winds here will make for VFR and partly mostly sunny skies up in the northwest. And this area now starting to kick back off to the northeast. That'll bring a chance of snow, mostly the eastern Brooks Range, Arctic Village back to areas east of Prudhoe Bay. So that'd be Kaktovik and Barter Island. Otherwise, no problems for the remainder of the Arctic coast. Showery, unsettled, and cloudy over the Aleutians. Getting a little more breezy out there to the west, maybe gusts to 25, 30 miles an hour out of the north. And then for Tuesday, this low tracks right up across the kind of north-northwest and could varying gusts 50 miles an hour to King Salmon on Tuesday there. In fact, all of southern Alaska here will be quite windy with rain along the North Gulf Coast, the heaviest again, southern Kenai Peninsula, and the lightest there in the lee side of the Chugach Mountains. Should be Kenai to Anchorage, Eagle River, and Palmer. And otherwise, up to the north, warm front, dry warm front, all the moisture getting wrung out on the Alaska range. So it's going to be quite a mild day on Tuesday in the Tanana Valley. And lows 10 to 15 in the north, upper 30s, lower 40s south, lower 40s for the Panhandle. Highs tomorrow 48 to 53 for the southeast coast, 55 to 62 for the Tanana Valley, and 20s for the North Slope. And then the lows about the same up here, coldest north of the Brooks Range. And for the highs, 60s, well into the 60s for the eastern or the mid and upper Tanana Valley.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Moving on to flying weather for Monday morning. Pretty good swath of VFR up here from the Seward Peninsula area, and kind of narrowing out here as you get to the upper Tanana Valley, 40-mile country over toward the border. Otherwise, some areas of IFR along the eastern slopes of the western Alaska Range, Togiak Bay up into the southwest hills, and out here over the the Gulf of Alaska up into Prince William Sound. Bering Sea, marginal as well as the Aleutians. IFR for the North Slope on out to the Arctic coast, and marginal to IFR for the southeast coast. Afternoon, really not much change down here for the Panhandle. Then we've got marginal VFR here, Gulf of Alaska, Prince William Sound, and the IFR there in and around Yakutat. Marginal VFR along the Alaska Range with VFR for eastern Kenai Peninsula on up into the Matanuska and possibly Susitna Valley, as well as a big chunk of the interior here. And the IFR kind of pulls back toward the Arctic coast. Marginal VFR socked in, still pretty well dominant over the Aleutians, but some VFR expanding to the northwest. And for Tuesday morning, marginal VFR still for the Aleutians and much of the Bering Sea right up to the Seward Peninsula. Here's the IFR zone, working into Bristol Bay, Alaska Peninsula, southern Kodiak Island, kind of going up the east side there. and then also eastern Kenai Peninsula, Prince William Sound, and back along the southern slopes of the eastern slopes of the Aleutian Range and the southern Alaska Range. That next system coming on in, and the Panhandle, a lot of IFR along and off the coast, as well as over toward the eastern border. And then for the afternoon, marginal VFR for the Panhandle, IFR, narrow band there up into western Prince William Sound, and marginal to VFR, south central Alaska, mostly VFR in the interior. North of the Brooks Range there, you've got some marginal VFR with a small area of IFR there on the eastern central Arctic coast, as well as here over the southwest. Otherwise marginal, St. Lawrence Island, Bering Sea, and the Aleutians. Passes shaping up like this tomorrow, and the Tuvik marginal VFR. Higher conditions, probably VFR just to the south and possibly IFR in the north side. Same pattern trend forecast here for Adigan with the best conditions, southern entrance to the south, marginal through the pass, possible IFR north. Lake Clark and Merrill IFR to start, becoming marginal VFR for the afternoon. And rainy, looks marginal throughout the day at times. Windy VFR and some possible marginal VFR southern entrance. Isabel, marginal. And Mentasta, VFR and southern entrance could see some marginal conditions at times with Tanita, VFR the entire day, and Portage, occasionally marginal IFR in that eastern entrance there. Kind of bounce through that a little quick. And for Chilkoot and White, marginal VFR. And for the freezing levels here, 2,000 to 6,000 feet there across the southeast coast. Tomorrow morning at the surface, they're getting a little squirrely, but right along the coast and north, all the way to the Seward Peninsula, along with 2,000 feet out here to the west-southwest, 4,000 Kodiak Island, and roughly about 2,000 here across the eastern and southern Bering Sea to the Aleutians. Icing, just some spotty stuff possible out here to the west and southwest Yukon Delta there, Nunivak Island, and maybe some rime icing here for below about 4,000 feet with that upper level disturbance up way up there to the northeast. Best sort of icing here would be for the southeast coast. Could be some considerable moderate in the narrow band coming onshore in the afternoon, and some icing extending back into Prince William Sound, possibly turning an arm. Jet stream, 18,000 foot wind flow chart with the jet stream winds at 33,000 feet. Southwest here, about 120 knots, turning westerly into the Panhandle. Weaker flow up over the interior, about 60 knots coming around the bottom of that small upper level low there. Big trough out over the Bering Sea. Moving on to 9,000 feet, northeast 15 to 20, 25 to maybe 30 knots into the central Aleutians here with a low over the Fox Islands. Southeast flow to the east of that at about 25, and 25 knots in across southern Alaska, and 25 for the Panhandle. 9,000 feet, we've got southeast 20 here coming up to the North Gulf Coast. Easterlies, high 25 knots, central Arctic coast. Northeast up to 25 to 35 across the Bering on down to the central Aleutian areas. Otherwise, southeast flow here, about 20 knots for the Alaska Peninsula, much lighter over the central and southwest interior to Bristol Bay. Turbulence could be some moderate chop below about 5,000 feet there for the North Gulf Coast, Prince William Sound, in toward the Talkeetna Mountains. And after the break, I'll be back with a look at the marine forecasts.
Welcome back to another edition of Alaska Weather Facts. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider, and joining me once again is Eric Stevens from the Geographic Information Network of Alaska, or GINA, based at the University of Alaska Fairbanks. Eric, welcome back to the show.
Well, Dave, it's great to be back. Thanks for inviting us again.
Sure thing. And today we want to talk about identifying burn scars. That would be the burned up area after a wildfire when the flames and the smoke are gone. We can see it if you drive by it on the roadway, of course, but from satellite, we can also identify those places on the land, right?
You know it. You know that expression, ouch, that's going to leave a mark?
Yeah.
After you bang your knee getting out of the car.
Oh yeah.
Well, the ouch, it's going to leave a mark, that also applies to the landscape. Whenever a wildfire ravages through, it's going to leave a mark on the landscape. After a wildfire burns out, this is called a burn scar.
Okay.
And you can ask yourself, well, that's interesting. We can see a burn scar from space. Right. Then the question is, well, why does that matter?
Okay.
Who cares?
Yeah, fire's over.
Right, the fire is over. We don't need to worry about this anymore. It turns out you kind of do, because burn scars are important. there's this old rule of thumb in the weather business that flood follows fire.
Okay.
The action of the fire in killing off the vegetation, in baking, kiln drying the landscape a little bit, can hinder the land's ability to absorb rainfall. So if you have a fire, especially if it's in complex mountainous terrain.
Right.
This is classic in California. It can happen somewhat in Alaska too. You get a wildfire in steep, hilly, or mountainous terrain, rips off all the vegetation off the landscape. Then 6 months later, there's a big rainstorm, and you get a flash flood in that area. So
Right.
flood can follow fire. That's why you got to know
Okay.
where the burn
That's
scars
important.
are. Secondly, a fire needs fuel to maintain itself. So if there's an old burn scar left over from a year or two ago, and then another summer later here in Alaska in the interior, it's a big wildfire season. If there's a fire advancing toward an old burn scar, well, guess what? That old burn scars can be tougher terrain for that new fire to get through because there's not as much fuel in that burn scar. So they almost act like a natural fire break. These are a couple of reasons why you need to know where those burn scars are. Alaska Fire Service has limited resources. They want to put their people and their equipment
Sure.
where it does the most good. They need to know, well, this is an area where there's no burn scar. We better put people here because that fire could really run.
So
That's why
really,
we do
really
it.
important for weather forecasters and fire weather forecasters for sure.
Oh, yeah.
But then how do weather satellites actually detect those burn scars?
Ah, good question.
Thanks.
Well, let's turn the Wayback Machine to the summer of 2015. That was a
Okay.
very active year. Got a picture here taken up in the White Mountains. This is one of the fires in progress that summer, and if you look real close, you can almost see Frodo throwing the ring into
Right,
the
no kidding.
volcano there. So that's quite the vision. Well, let's look at a visible image. Here we are in
Okay.
Alaska's interior. This is before the fires got out of the cage in early summer of 2015. Let's zoom into the western interior here. Again, this is a weather satellite image of visible light, what the human eye can see.
Okay.
We're into the middle reach of the Yukon Valley there in the western interior, Galena area. And this is just a beautiful visible day. Nothing much going on. It's in early June before the fires really got active. But then in 2015, the fires got loose, especially in that western interior.
Right.
Here's another image. The same satellite pass as
Okay.
that visible image, but now we're not quite looking at visible light.
Very different.
There's a slight change here. This image incorporates something called the veggie band.
Okay.
0.86 micron wavelength. The micron's very tiny,
Yeah.
but that wavelength responds to vegetation, the chlorophyll. So trees and grasses reflect that part of the electromagnetic spectrum back to the satellite. And so the satellite sees that. When signal comes at that wavelength to the satellite, we know, there's some vegetation growing there. This is great. You can identify coastlines so easily because you go from vegetation to water. Turns out if you have a burn scar, guess what? You burned away the vegetation, so that's going to
Okay.
show up. We're going to do a before, during, and after kind of look here. And so we're
Okay.
looking at before. So in this image, we got a lot of green out there. That's wonderful.
Right.
Another fun thing about this kind of imagery is you can see down in the Alaska Range in the southeast corner of the image, it's blue.
Yeah.
That's glaciers and snow
Oh,
in the
of course.
mountains.
Okay.
So this is not really what the human eye can see. This is these wavelengths are beyond human vision, but we've made them look certain colors. So the vegetation looks green. Now let's look at that same kind of satellite recipe, but during the fires. This is in July. The fires are loose. You can see the smoke in the middle of the image, the smearing look of the smoke, and then we can see some clouds that are white, icy clouds are blue. So this is in July of 2015. The fires are doing their thing. We're burning up millions of acres. Now let's go to September. The fires are out. The audience has left the theater. You know, the event's over, right?
Right.
We're done. But guess what? Now look at those brown
Oh, look at
patches.
that.
All of those places are where the fire has burned away the vegetation. So you can see where the fires were. You can add up these perimeters, get acreage burned and such. And so that's good to know. Now remember, flood follows fire, and these are also natural fire breaks. So you need to know where these guys are. In the course of the 2015 summer season, we went from before with not much burn scar in this area to just a couple months later, we can see so much burn scarring on the landscape. What's interesting too about the satellite and looking at burn scars is you realize that burn scars are the gift that keeps on giving. You can forget that a couple of years ago maybe there was a fire in a certain area, but the satellite won't forget. So in the summertime we get wildfires in Alaska, but guess what? In the visible imagery here we can see the burn scars just a little bit, but they're not as prominent as in that veggie band. But then you can't see them at all if you cover them up with snow, right?
Exactly.
So here's an image from the middle of the winter time,
wow.
and snow on the ground by this recipe looks blue. Again, these are wavelengths of light that the human eye can't really see. We're getting up into the infrared, near infrared, and the way we've assigned colors is if there's snow on the ground or there's a glacier, it looks blue, kind of intuitive. So this is early April of the following year, 2016.
Okay.
We're just about to get into breakup. We've got a lot of snow on the ground, and now it's all going to melt. And as the snow melts, then you get our final image here. Doesn't this look familiar? This looks like a lot of what we saw in September of the previous summer. So this is the spring of the next year. The fires themselves might not have overwintered, they're gone, but the fire scar does. And as the snow melts away, and then you have breakup, and then you have green up, whenever the leaves come out, the grass comes back, except in the burned areas, they're having a tough time because everything got burned off the previous year. So you can see these scars even the next summer, multiple years. It depends on what kind of vegetation there is. You know, some of the tussocky tundra grasses, they'll grow back really quick, but to get a forest to come back, that'll take much longer. So these burn scars, eventually the landscape will fill in the burn scar. It will heal itself, if you want to use that metaphor. But for the next few years, you can still keep track of these on satellite. And again, the reason we want to do that is that the burn scar can facilitate a flood, and it can act like a fire break. So there you are, the veggie band.
tools. So if you're a weather satellite and you're looking at my bowl of vegetables here, you might be able to pick out which one's the pea, which one's the tomato, and which one's the carrot, and apply that information precisely to whatever it is you're working on there. That is really fascinating stuff, that we have that capability from so high above the planet Earth, and Alaska for that matter.
Yep,
Eric?
eat your veggies.
Yes, definitely. I think I will. I'm hungry. Thanks so much for joining us again, Eric, and thank you for joining us for another edition of Alaska Weather Facts. We'll see you right here next time.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back. Today's sea ice analysis continuing to show a slight thaw in the conditions here. No ice now south of St. Lawrence Island, and really getting thin on the heavier ice to the north there. And you can see kind of opening up a little bit, or thinning out anyway, here on the western central Arctic coast. And expect a slow thawing and diminishing of these sea ice conditions, especially here south of the Bering Strait over the next 4 or 5 days. And for the coastal water forecast there along the southeast coast, south 15 to 20 on the south coast, about 20 knots sustained on the north coast, seas 7 feet. Southeast 25, gusts 40 for Lynn Canal tomorrow, and southeast 20 with gale force gusts also for Stevens Passage. Clarence Strait, though, south at 15. And then even lighter, southeast 10 for Clarence Strait on Tuesday, south 15 here for most of the coastline, turning southeast farther to the north. South 20, Lynn Canal, and 15-knot winds for Stevens Passage with 3-foot seas. Prince William Sound tomorrow, east winds 25 knots, seas 4 feet. Otherwise, after the gale warnings tonight here for the North Gulf Coast, tomorrow and tomorrow afternoon, south to southeast at about 15, and south 15 for the Barren Islands, southeast 20, Kamishak Bay, northeast 20 here south of the Forelands Cook Inlet with 7-foot seas. And then for Tuesday, those turn easterly and come back up. Snowcraft advisories, east 25 here for southern Cook Inlet, seas building to 8 feet, otherwise north of the Forelands, northeast 15. Southeast 30 knots, 12-foot seas, Kamishak Bay, south 30 for the Barren Islands, and southeast 20 there in Prince William Sound, 4-foot seas, and small craft advisories for the eastern North Gulf with those south winds at 25. And Kodiak Island, south to southeast at about 15 knots, not too bad windwise tomorrow, 3 to 7-foot seas, even lighter winds here southwest of Sitkinak. Alaska Peninsula and Bristol Bay, southerlies at 15 knots with 4-foot seas here for Bristol Bay and the north side of the peninsula. South side, though, seas at 8 feet. Excuse me. And then that next storm pulling up to the northwest here, and will be about in this location by the mid-afternoon, mid to late afternoon Tuesday. Anyway, south 40 knots from Castle Cape to Sitkinak here. Good gales there. Southeast 35, Shelikof Strait. Kodiak, south 30, 14-foot seas, and southwest 35 knots south of the Alaska Peninsula, west 30 knots north of the peninsula. Bristol Bay, southeast 35 with higher gusts. And then for the Fox Islands, south 10 to 15 knots for the Unalaska Island area. Otherwise, back across Nikolsky, north at 15 to 20. Almost sneezed. I fought it off, though. North 20 here for the central Aleutians, back to about Amchitka. And north 25 out west, Kiska to Shimia with 8-foot seas. Those turn northwest at 20 out there, 7-foot seas on Tuesday. North 20 from Amchitka eastward, and then the central Aleutians back to the small current advisories northwest at 25. Unmak Island northwest 20 to 25 knots, and Alaska Island southwest 10 to 20. And for the areas south of Nunivak Island, light southerlies tomorrow at about 15, but north of the islands, north 20, and those increase to 25 knots for St. Lawrence Island. Same thing for St. Matthew Island, north at 20 for the Pribilofs. And north 15 knots there for St. Paul and St. George. So lighter winds on Tuesday. Still small craft advisory, St. Matthew Island, northeast 25 for St. Lawrence Island. Northerlies 20 to 25 here along the southwest coast. Eastern Boulevard Sea Coast, northeast 15, so even lighter winds tomorrow, definitely than what you had today and yesterday. And east 25, so the brisk wind advisories continue here on the west side down to about Cape Thompson, but 15 knots for the southeast Chukchi Sea here to Bering Strait. And the outlook for Tuesday, northeast 20 for the area from Wales up to Cape Thompson, and 30-knot winds from Cape Thompson to Cape Beaufort. Brisk wind advisories here on the western Arctic coast, only 10 knots for the central and east side, and back up to 15 for the far eastern zone. And for tonight, again, areas of clouds increasing definitely, and areas of moisture starting to develop as an upper level system here. Kind of latches onto some moisture and pulls it up to the northeast. So look for increasing moisture, nothing too heavy the way it looks at this point in time. Rain increasing for the coast, gales, and rain increasing for the North Gulf Coast. Showery for Kodiak. Areas of rain along this front, not too strong, and it'll be pretty light. And that'll extend all the way down to the low center. And then for tomorrow, rain into the Panhandle again, and a big storm pulls into the Kuskokwim Delta on Tuesday with rain and wind.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.